Thank you all for joining for this session. And before we begin, I just want to give a small context of this year's theme, that is media literacy, within which we have today's session on film literacy, and that is cinema and representation. As most of you would know, that film literacy is a way in which we understand how moving images make meaning. And I hope that this session will encourage all of us to watch more films and look at it from a very different perspective. And who more, more apt to discuss this than our guest, Mr. Baradwaj Rangan. Welcome for this session, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this session for us.
Thank you
Uh,
for having me.
yeah, just let me begin with this one question that most students have, when we talk to them about cinema, is that what is that we critique in a film? Is reviewing a film equal to film critiquing? Is it that the same thing that you do?
Uh, I try to make a difference in between the two words, but it's not a hard and fast rule. What I mean by review is a review is a common word that's generally used. Uh, like you go to Amazon and you want to check out if a product is worth buying. Then you see what is the word for that, right? You click on something called a link called customer review. That is what like a review has come to mean in the general sense. That is, what are the general people talking about it, and is this going to be something that's going to be something that affects your buying? In cinematic terms, it means that that's going to be something that affects your decision to go buy a ticket for that particular movie. Now, I look at the way I do it as very different, because I don't mean to say it's better or worse. I'm just saying it's different. For me, that is of no use, because trying to provide a review for a refrigerator is different, because it's you install the refrigerator in each home and it's going to function the same way. Whereas movies and any kind of art work very differently, because they engage with us individually and with our emotions and the way we've been built. So something that one person finds very boring, another person could find very interesting, and vice versa. So I find the whole process of giving a review beyond my capacity, because I just don't know how to judge something in that way. What I rather do is try to present material, like make a case for my like or dislike of the film with the things inside the film itself, and which I like to call critique or analysis. But I wish there was some consensus on what terms to use for these, because yes, I'm called a film reviewer, I'm called a film critic. I'm not comfortable with the term critic, because it kind of sounds like I'm criticizing all the time, which I don't do. Yeah, but yeah, there you go. That's hopefully some of the answer to your question.
Okay, and then it brings me to the next question: that do you need exceptional qualities or qualification to become a good critic?
I would say a sympathetic imagination is very important. I would say that more than the technique part of it, more than knowing what uh, the types of cameras used or the type of editing software used or whatever it is, that's the technique part of it. That is for people who make movies, right? But I think for people who want to analyze movies, engage with them, I think a sympathetic imagination is very important, which means that you should be able to step out of your world and enter into the world of the film, even if it's a very different world from yours, right? To give you a classic example of something that caused a lot of controversy in the year it was released, let's take Kabir Singh, right? Now, is he the ideal protagonist? No. But if you're going to say, I don't, the point is not to say, do I want somebody like that hanging around me as a friend? No. But do I want to see a movie about him within the confined to his space and kind of taking his point of view? Yes, I do that, because I want to enter into the heads of likable people, unlikable people, politically incorrect people, murderers, good people, saints, everybody, right? Despite the fact that I might find myself very, very different from all these people. So I'm saying sympathetic imagination is one of the first and most important. Just like we say, to make a friend, one of the first things you need is empathy. One of the things that you need to engage with art, for me, is sympathetic imagination. You have to be able to transfer yourself to the world of the film and then take on the process of analyzing the film.
Which brings to the next point, that is it really then possible for you to actually enjoy a film? Uh,
Absolutely, absolutely.
okay.
Because see, I don't see this as I see this as two parallel processes, not as two different processes. For example, uh, when you're doing the analysis, there is also a level of appreciation that's happening. Like you're laughing, you're crying, you're doing all these things, except that your brain is working and saying that this is why you're laughing and that's why you're crying. I give this example often. Let's say you go to like a classical music concert, right? It is possible to go in and sit down and just say, oh, this is very pleasant music, if you don't know anything. But if you know something about the grammar of the music, if you know the raga, if you know something, then you're able to put that very same song that other people are listening to into a context. You're able to put a frame around it and say, oh wow, the way she sings this particular phrase of this raga is so beautiful. That doesn't mean you're not enjoying the music. It just means that you're enjoying the music, and you're also able to put a frame around it. You're able to contextualize it. You're able to refer to historical stuff. So the two are concurrent processes.
Considering that we have a huge population about millennials, who have acquired taste for K-pop and K-cinema, do you think, there is a possibility that they can get inspired and, watch films about made by, say, Ghatak or Ray or Shyam Benegal? Sometimes when we go to the classroom and we talk about some of these filmmakers, even Hitchcock for that matter, there is this surprising factor that, oh, do they exist? That kind of a feeling. Bringing them to the classrooms and saying, you should watch a Girish Kasarwali's film, would make a lot of sense. Or Shyam Benegal's Welcome to Sajjanpur, or Bimal Roy or Mehboob Khan. When you talk about Indian cinema, John Abraham, so many eminent filmmakers in the body of work. So how do you think we can encourage, the millennials to kind of view it and, reflect on the Indian sensibilities in cinema?
So first question I would ask myself is, should we encourage, right? What is it that we're really trying to do? For me, it is more important to record and keep there so that at least those who are interested find something worth reading about something. So I think the recording is the very important aspect of it, right? About the encouraging, I think it's next to impossible, because uh, first of all, you find that our brains are getting rewired as we speak, because we've gotten used to a certain pace. We've gotten used to clicking on to something else. When this doesn't sustain our attention enough, we go to something else. So the whole idea of sitting before, like I did, sitting before Doordarshan because there was only one channel and there was nothing else, and therefore you watch Benegal, and therefore you develop a taste for his films. That is impossible today, because your brain is not going to be allowed to function that way. You'll get a phone call, you'll get Instagram something update notification. Uh, it's just not possible. Now, my point is more that I want those who are interested in this to be able to find enough to contextualize these films, so that when they say, I want to watch a Kasravalli or a Ghatak or whatever it is, Ghatak is actually easy because Ray Ghatak Sen have been written about quite a bit. But I'm talking about mainstream filmmakers like probably even a Manmohan Desai, right? Now it's very easy to come and say there's no logic in Amar Akbar Anthony, but the movie is not about logic, right? It's a certain kind of filmmaking. Who's going to? Would you go to a Laurel and Hardy movie and say there's no logic? Would you go to a Buster Keaton movie and say there's no logic? Why do we? So I'm saying that those kind of context-driven writing, that kind of context-driven writing should be made available for these films, so that when a millennial or whichever generation is going to come from now, they approach these films, they find something that's written about it in a hopefully informed way.
Okay. One more thought that comes to my mind, since we were discussing about millennials, is the very fact that the recent pandemic has affected cinema in a certain way. Now instead of theaters, films are getting released on OTT platform, which is a very convenient way of engaging for the youth, or most of us now are switching to OTT platforms. So considering the fact that now it's going to be the next normal, watching films on Netflix or Amazon Prime, do you think that it will be possible to have more of an inclusive kind of a cinema? Because something which we used to see is film censorship in the theater release kind of a thing. But with OTT, there is a content which is very bold and now possible for us to watch in a private space. Do you think that is going to change the way we look at cinema? Do you think more
Um,
bold content might come, or will we have more new realistic kind of films coming in?
what do you mean by inclusive? I'm not sure.
So when I mean inclusive here, is it more in terms of say gender or say caste identities, which
Yeah,
otherwise would not have been possible, or sexuality, which theater release used to have a lot of problem with, but
yeah,
now you have a space where you can release. You can talk about various stories
right.
about people who otherwise considered marginalized. So do you think that possibility, that shift, is more possible, or we still have
Uh,
restriction of business hours?
so there is a theoretical answer to this question and there's a practical answer to this question. I'm going to do the theoretical answer first. Yes, it is
Okay.
possible in theory to kind of hope for a more inclusive cinema because in theory, platforms are not going to be dependent on opening weekend, how many people are in theaters. Now, the theatrical business, as the famous saying goes, is about putting bums on seats. So you want as many people to come to come to the theaters, and so you try to flatten the narrative to the more you want people to come in, the more you flatten the narrative, right? It's like in the sense of you make it like if you try to talk that if you try to drop the name of a caste, then you're suddenly going to offend people of that caste, right? So those kinds of things become a consideration. Like, should I mention this? Should I talk about Muslims? Should I talk about this? Like, supposing we have a villain, do we make that? Will we, do we make him a? If we make him a Hindu, then maybe something would we'd get protests or whatever. So all those considerations come into play, right? Now all that is going to go away in OTT, where you can do exactly the kind of movie that you want in the way you want. The practical thing, though, is that the OTT model right now, apart from a few cinephiles, let's say, use that term loosely, most people want to watch on OTT, what they watched on cinema, what they watch in cinema halls typically. So they don't want to go into two. They still want the. They might watch a caste issue if presented to them in the format of an Article 15, which is the mainstream kind of format. But will they watch it if it's presented in something in the format of an Adur Gopalakrishnan film? I don't know. Because, first of all, because the thing is, right now, we don't have the numbers for those things because OTT platforms keep the numbers hidden. But as of now, what we've seen is that from the content that OTT has been acquiring, they are still interested in the content that works, that speaks the language of theatrical content, not an excessively arty kind of content.
Or do you think there will be complete, shift in the way we are looking at cinema, from looking at a very linear narrative to more of interactive, where the
Yeah,
audiences will have a choice to what ending they would want to watch,
yeah,
what
yeah,
how.
yeah. So that whole thing of Bandersnatch and things like that, you will have a choice. I think though that I don't think that's going to become the only model, but I think that definitely, I think we've seen the end of the. We are going to see the end of the 2 hour plus movie. I do not think people are going to have the patience for longer films. People have already lost patience with songs. People have already lost patience with a lot of, like, gradually, like over the last 20 years, we've seen things being dropped off. At one point, a movie was unimaginable without a comedy track. That's gone now. At one point, a movie was unimaginable without 6 songs. That's gone now. At one time, a movie was unimaginable without, like certain things, like certain emotions, certain beats. All that's gone now. And now we're going to say at one point it was unimaginable that a movie would be made without an interval. That's possible now. You don't have to structure an interval moment with a big bang so that it's like the movie builds and builds and you have this big climax after which people go out, buy the popcorn, come back, and then the movie starts all over again. You can just have uh, like, if you want, you can structure it like the classic 3 act structure in Hollywood, where it's not dependent, because people talk a lot about the 3 act structure here, but you've never really had the 3 act structure because you only have before interval and after interval. It's a 2 act like structure. If you want to divide it into acts, it's like pre-interval, post-interval, because how do you divide the story into two halves so that you are able to break it at an interval point? which sometimes led to a lot of unnecessary padding in the first half or something, because they know that the big bang, we have to wait for that. But I still have about 10 minutes to fill up. What do I do? I'll just try and put this in or put that song in or something like that. All that will go off. So now it's just going to be, I think movies will come down to 145, 1.5 hours. So I think it's going to be that kind of movie from now on.
So, are you suggesting that we'll be moving away from a traditional feature film length to more like a large short film, that is
No,
quite available on
90,
YouTube?
105 minutes, 120 minutes. These are all very valid feature film lengths. In like in the US, you have 1 hour 40-minute films all the time. I'm not saying that the long movie is going to go away completely, but see, in a theater, like let's say there are 4 or 5 songs, right? You sometimes sit through the songs because they're coming in while you're in the theater. At home, if you're going to skip through those songs, and they're also very expensive, by avoiding those songs, they might be able to bring down the budgets. Because at home, when you're watching, are you watching it for the story, or are you watching it for that lens? That's why it's going to be very interesting. Right now, we can only speculate about how this model is going to turn out, because once movies start getting made for OTT specifically, right now we're only seeing web series being made for OTT specifically. We haven't seen movies being made, specifically made for OTT. We've seen some movies that didn't release in theaters that are coming to us, OTT. So it's only now that I think we're going to see that real change happen. And I won't be surprised if people start, I can I suppose even a 1 hour movie is in theory possible, because if you're able to tell a gripping story in 60 minutes, why not? Why should I, like watch the same thing packed out to 120 minutes?
Also, do you think that that will change the way we look at film reviewing, since it's an instant release and everybody's watching at the same
Yeah.
time?
So I'm saying that the recommendation aspect of it will become more and more important, because there will be such a glut of content uh, that people will want to know, what do I even watch now. So the thing about this reviewing kind of like customer review kind of review is that one useful thing is, if there are 10 reviewers and 8 of them say good things about it, there's a fair chance that it's worked, right? It's going to work for you. I mean, it may still not work for you, but generally speaking, when 80% or 70% of the reviewing public says it's something that's worth it, then it's probably going to work. Now, the point is, the reviewer is now going to be a kind of a curator. They're going to be the ones who sift through all these hours and hours and hours of content, because every time somebody drops an 8 episode or a 10 episode TV show, you're not going to be able to go and watch it. Nobody has the time. So the point is to kind of see which are the ones that got better reviews, which are the ones that are being recommended, and then kind of go towards that.
What is your suggestion to students who wish to write about cinema, want to start their own blog? What do you suggest they should start? How should they start?
I would say start a blog, and which is the easiest thing to do. And if you want to write about cinema, or if you want to work in the film beat, then I would say find a movie every other day or every third day, and watch it and write it at once. Write about it at once, because that's what you get to do when you're like Monday, there is something dropping on Amazon, and I'll have to watch it and I'll have to review it at once. Now, if you find that you can do this 3 times a week, and by the end of 6 months, you don't want to kill yourself, then maybe you are on your way to, like, because this is a job that requires a lot of stamina, a lot of mental stamina to stay positive, because it's very easy to get jaded in this job. Because if you see like 10 weeks of bad movies, you shouldn't. So when you go, there should be some kind of, that's why I'm saying that you should always love and respect the genre that we are going to watch, right? If you know that this kind of movie is never going to work for you, you should never go near it, because then you know that you don't like the genre itself, and then you don't like this movie. Now, I find a lot of people today, like every time, because there are, like, a genre is like a filmmaker. Now, let's take Sanjay Leela Bhansali, right? Now he makes a particular kind of movie. By the second time you watch, let's say you watch one Sanjay Leela Bhansali movie, doesn't work for you. Okay, then everybody says this second one is good, and you go watch that, but it still doesn't work for you. But then I would, if I were not a critic, I would sign out. I would say, okay, this guy doesn't work for me. But if you keep going to his work, it will keep annoying you because you are not in sync with what that person is doing. It doesn't mean you're right or he's right or you're wrong or he's wrong. It's just that you two are not in sync. Now, when that sync is not happening and you go subjecting yourself to a piece of work that is not in sync, for some reason, people do that in movies all the time. They don't do that with books. They don't do that with music. They do that with movies all the time. It's like, I don't know why they do that. It's like, if a Rohit Shetty movie doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Would you, nobody reads books that they can't stand, the author. Nobody says, I don't like this author, but I'm going to read this book from start to finish and then be so filled with rage and then I'm going to empty out all that rage on Twitter. They don't do that. They don't do that with music. If they don't like a composer, one album of a composer or a band, then maybe they'll give the second album a shot, but then the third one they won't go near because it's like the world is full of things that give you joy and pleasure and which are in sync with your views. But with movies, I found that people, I think it's something like the fear of missing out. They want to be there to comment on that particular film, or I don't know what it is, but they will go watch, be filled with fury because obviously the movie is not in sync with their tastes at all, and then come and empty all those black thoughts on Twitter or whatever it is. I'm like, I don't see the point because it's 3 hours of your life. There's a ton of other things that you could do with it that will give you joy. I've never gotten this.
But also, don't you see that it would have been much better if we actually allow people from these sections, especially sexuality and abilities, to play the real role rather than asking, a very famous actor or an actress to, play their character. There's one question which has come here which said, why don't we ever see transgender actors playing transgender characters? Is this a kind of lip service to marginalized communities?
So this is a very, I'm going to give see, you have to consider the fact that film is a business. Now if, now you will find that traditionally, there are more straight actors that have played gay roles than there are gay actors who played straight roles, or gay actors who even played gay roles. Mm-hmm. Tom Hanks in Philadelphia, Tom Hanks is straight and he's playing a gay man in Philadelphia, right? So that is because Tom Hanks is a star. Now, when you have see, I will say that a certain amount of this also rests on the audience, because when you show that you are willing to go and patronize a movie and endorse a movie in theaters, despite there not being a star factor, the whole world of cinema will change. Because the only evidence that a producer or director has that my movie is reaching across is the number of tickets that are sold. Now, if you say that I will come for the theme and not for the actor, I will come and watch a Philadelphia, even if an unknown gay actor is playing that part, and not if Tom Hanks is playing the part, then the whole movie system everywhere will change, because suddenly you can cast anybody in any role. But now what's happening is you can only make small indie films with unknown actors because of the very nature of the budget. They cannot afford the bigger actors. Otherwise, 9 times out of 10, see, for example, when Mary Com came out, a lot of people said, why can't you cast a Northeasterner? Why do you want to cast Priyanka Chopra, right? No, that is a very valid argument. There is nothing wrong with that argument at all. But seen from the business angle of things, Priyanka Chopra makes the movie a semi-hit, right? Because of her, the Mary Com story reaches more people, more homes. So would you rather, so again, it depends on what you want. Do you want a star to act in a movie and have the film and its theme reach more people? Or do you want to be authentic and cast a non-star and restrict the appeal of the film to only people who are going to go because they already bought into the subject? That's a very tricky question, that doesn't have an answer. That's not an easy answer. So for me, I don't want to see Priyanka Chopra on the role, and yet I want to see Priyanka Chopra on the role. I don't want to see her in the role because she's not a Northeasterner. She's appropriating somebody else's identity. But then I want to see her in the role because there are no stars from Northeast India. And without that, the movie will not travel across India. The Mary Kom story will not penetrate into the get national attention, the way, like in a movie. Of course, that's Mary Kom is a star, but movies make a star more of a star, right? Like the story becomes known more because of movies, right? Otherwise, only the people who follow boxing are going to know who Mary Kom is. So that's a really tricky question that you're facing there, and I'm saying that there is one way definitely. I mean, of course, it depends on the people making the movie also, but it isn't just their responsibility. It is also the audience's responsibility to show that we will go and make hits out of these films, even if there is no star. Because whether in Hollywood or whether here, if you see 9 out of 10 films that become hits are all star-driven films. So people go to see films in our country, in Hollywood, any mainstream industry, people go to see films because it's an Amir Khan film. It's an Amitabh Bachchan film. It's a something film. It's a Kangana film. It's a Priyanka film. It's a Deepika film. That's how they choose what films to watch. Most of them. There's definitely a small number of people who watch, but then those people are insignificant in terms of how much they contribute to the movie's box office. That's a very small number that goes for thematic, things. So it's a
Demand
question
and
that
supply, yeah, kind of a thing, yeah. So how did you go about the film, in the sense, did you go first by watching a lot of films, or did you start interacting? What was the process like? So for, a budding filmmaker or a student would want to write a film about someone, what do you suggest could be the process of writing on someone like Mani Ratnam or any filmmaker of his stature?
So, see, my first idea was to write a book of essays. It wasn't, conversations idea was never in mind, because one of the things I always heard about Mani Ratnam was that he doesn't talk. And he's a very, like a, an introverted kind of person. So I would say anybody should first watch the films, should like the filmmaker, should find enough things to like in the filmmaker's work. They should find patterns. They should be able to find patterns in that filmmaker's work. They should be able to say, wow, this is something that this guy really likes doing. Like, like for instance, Mani Ratnam likes, making his heroines married women. He likes placing Tamilians in non-Tamil places, like, somewhere else where the language becomes a handicap. So these are all, once a theme emerges, once you note certain patterns and things like that, I think it becomes, you start getting interested in a filmmaker. Because first of all, if you're not interested in a filmmaker's work, you should not be writing that book about that filmmaker, because it doesn't make any sense. You don't, I would say you don't have a moral authority. Just like I would say that if you don't like a genre and you're writing reviews about it, you don't have the moral authority to write about that movie, because you are reviewing something. It's like saying, I don't like Italian food, but my newspaper is making me go to this restaurant because I need a job, and therefore I'm eating this, but it's like crap because I don't like Italian food. It's a circular argument that makes no sense. But I would say find a filmmaker that you like, make a lot of for me, because I grew up in the 80s. I'm a 70s born. I grew up in the 80s. So for me, Mani Ratnam's films just hit me, right? When I was at that age, at the right age, when I was just becoming a cinephile, when I was just getting interested in cinema. So, like it's hard to explain even to people of today, like, because they'll say, yeah, I've seen Nayagan, but I don't know, I can't see what the fuss is about. It's like something like that. But then you're seeing Nayagan, I don't know what, 20, 30, 25, 30 years after it was released. You should have, like, everything is a product of its time, right? It's like saying, I saw, like, not to make all comparisons or anything like that, but Like whenever I show Citizen Kane in my class, uh, I teach a journalism class in filmmaking. People are like, they find it so hard to A, watch black and white films, and B, they find it so difficult to bear the pace,
Yeah.
you know. So how do you like even begin to make that bridge come across, right? So that's what I'm saying. So it's like we have entered a world where people's tastes, let me put it this way. See, the reason a lot of us became cinephiles is because by force we watched a lot of movies that we would not have otherwise watched, simply because that was the only movie playing on the only channel available at that time. Now I can choose the movies that I want from my tastes. I don't have to go and watch Orson Welles. I don't have to go and watch Ingmar Bergman. I don't have to watch anything that I don't like, because there's always so many options available. So I would say it's probably a little tougher to get that spectrum of knowledge that you need to become a critic. You need to become a critic. Similarly, when you're writing about filmmaker, I would say that if you find yourself fascinated by certain things that a person does, not because that person, he or she, is cool or whatever, but because you genuinely feel you're responding to something, then I would say that's when you really know that you're that you have it in yourself. And then what you do is, the steps that you follow are, you watch all the films and you watch them over and over and over again, and you watch them in sequence, you watch them out of order. Then you have all these things happening where you suddenly notice that, wow, that scene from movie number 2 is actually is like
Yeah.
is presented in this different form in movie number 12. You know, that
Especially
kind
the
of,
music, when you see in Indian context, a lot of
yeah,
times when what is the background score suddenly becomes the whole song in the
whole
next film.
song, yeah. So you kind of, so that happens. So you start watching the films, you start putting them together, you do these mashups, you kind of, so there is no pattern to it, but then you internalize the movies so much that that you kind of, when you go to that person with the questions, you know that you're taking them along in an internal journey. And we've reached an era where we don't need biographical information anymore. That's all there on wiki. We don't need to know when somebody was born, when somebody was something, all that is gone, right? And also, people are constantly being interviewed these days. Before every film's release, they're being interviewed. So there is already so much of stuff that's out there in interviews or on the web. So what is it that your book hopes to accomplish? What is, if you're just going to compile those interviews and put them in a book, then there's no use, because I can just go to wiki and Google it up and read it. Uh, but what beyond that, right? Because when I wrote the book about Mani Ratnam, which is 2012, he had not spoken about, I mean, he was not a great interview giver at that point. And he had been interviewed, of course, but they were fairly short interviews. There were not too many in-depth things. But today, you find that before movies are being promoted, or even after movies, you find a lot of frontline filmmakers giving long, expansive interviews on video, on text, or they write themselves. So how do you, what does your book go and do beyond all this? Are all questions that we'll have to face.
We have almost come to the end of our session. So, one quick last question.
Sure.
What has been your biggest challenge as a film critic? I think something that, you know, that's one part. And the second part is, what is one thing that you love as a film critic?
I think the love is easy because I love cinema. I just love thing. You know, people. I'm watching a film and thinking about it, or writing about it, or talking about it is something that still has. It's still a big part of me, and I don't think I would be able to do this job if that wasn't there. What's the other question? What is the
The
challenge
challenge, yes,
of being a critic?
yes.
For me, the challenge is like you to go back to an earlier word that you use. It is finding the uh, is being actually. It's for me. It's being relevant. You know, see when me and a bunch of critics started writing on the internet, it was early 2003, 2002, 2003. That was a very different world. That was a world that still read, you know, because visual information was not that much on the web. I don't even know, see, like Twitter was definitely not there, Facebook was not there. So there was still some level of people still read you must have heard of these things called newspapers. People still read those things. So, there was to kind of adapt over the years. That's been the biggest challenge. Like, to come into a digital platform like Film Companion, to do videos, to do interviews, and also not lose that core, because I think of myself primarily as a writer. For me, my primary identity is writing about films, not making videos about films. But I mean, I love it. I love that part of the job also. But for me, the what I identify myself as. So how to do videos and keep doing all these things that all your cool young students will like, but at the same time find carve out a bit of time so that I can do what really gives my soul satisfaction, which is writing. I think all these have been the biggest challenge, because the pace at which films hit us has increased so much that earlier I used to watch a movie on Friday and I had to submit the review on Saturday evening, so that because it would go up in the Sunday edition and it would appear on Sunday morning. Now I watch a movie on a Friday morning and I have to have the review out by Friday early evening. It's something that you really have to be committed to doing, and I and I think that people follow you also only because you bring something to the table. And whatever it is, it's hard to define what you bring to the table, but whatever it is, you want to make sure that you keep bringing that to the table in at least 7 out of 10 reviews. You are going to have off days. You are going to have days when you're not reading a film right or something's not going wrong. But there's this thing called consistency. And people know that 7 to 8 times out of 10, if I go to this guy, then I know that there is something that I'm going to find interesting in the writing. And of course, I can't think about, oh, what am I going to find interesting in this review that I'm typing, because then you go mad. But hopefully, something comes out. And I think that's the biggest challenge, to stay relevant after all these things. Because one of the things that I used to find a little scary, but now I just laugh, is when people come to say, oh, I've been reading you since I was in first standard and all. And I'm like, I've really been writing for that long. It just gives me a heart attack. It's like, that's like, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but what I'm saying is they'll say things like,
Yeah.
ever since I was in school or something like that, I've been reading you. And I'm like, oh my God, when I started writing, this person was in school. So just kind of, that's insane to kind of think about that, just so to hopefully that person who is now, 20 years from that point is still reading me. So that's the hope.
That I think brings us to the end of the session. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this session, and for all these wonderful things that you've told our students. I'm sure a lot of students will get inspired and write about Indian cinema and filmmakers, and at least bring in more about of an awareness. As you said, demand and supply. So we'll create more demand so that we have right kind of cinema also coming in. Thank you
Fantastic.
once again.
Thank you so much for having me here. And I really want to appreciate one thing about this session, is that you're asking me if we can do this with inputs from the students. And I'm really happy that we did it that way, because I always like it when the target audience is involved in the session. It makes it feel more useful. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much.